Night of the Living Dead is the quintessential zombie movie. It's a masterpiece by George A. Romero, and he followed it up with Dawn of the Dead 10 years later, a film that was also super well received. There was a third film in this trilogy called Day of the Dead. It didn't get the best reception of all three films, but it's still considered a very solid movie. I had never seen it before. I had never even heard of it until my friend approached me and said, "Hey, we should watch it because it may not be the best zombie movie, but it has a really interesting perspective on human life." So we're going to be talking about it today. If you want to watch the movie beforehand, please do. We do get into spoilers at a certain point, but if that doesn't bother you, keep on watching.
Please don't yell.
What are your thoughts?
I thought it was really interesting because I think everybody's seen Night of the Dead, whether it be the stage version or the classic film version. And it was like, because you watch Night of the Living Dead and you're like, okay, this is where all the zombie movie tropes come from, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Day of the Dead was so different from like every other zombie movie I've seen, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it really got creative. And you had mentioned something to me, and I don't want to steal your thunder too much.
Go ahead, go
I
ahead.
want you to elaborate on it. But you talked about how you thought about it less of it as a zombie film and more as an examination of the human condition. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was just really, really fascinating because it was like ultimately in this movie, the humans lead to their own demise, and you see like a mounting, like different dynamics mounting towards each other, and ultimately that's why it falls apart. So I thought it was really fascinating. That's my initial thoughts coming out of it.
Yeah, so I think in a lot of the Dead movies, like Night of the Living Dead has some themes about racism. It had, the black gentleman in there, which was really controversial at the time. And then I think, Dawn of the Dead was more fun. It was like, what happens if society's crumbling and you just give everybody a mall?
Yeah.
And I think even like both like Romero's Dawn of the Dead and then the remake, I think it's pretty much both the same thing. But I think that Day of the Dead is interesting because it's trying to figure out what people would do, but it's really not giving humanity the benefit of the doubt at all.
Yeah.
Like you're really hard pressed to find decent human beings in this movie.
Absolutely. I think like if you remade this film now,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be a huge hit. But then some people would be like, "Oh, you're pandering because of what's going on currently in our world."
That's the thing, is that
It's so weird.
it fits in so well. I mean, probably around the time this movie was made, Romero was probably going for like Cold War vibes.
Oh, for
He
sure.
probably, the idea of like living in a bunker or the bomb coming were probably like much more on people's minds.
Mhm.
And it's kind of funny, like watching it, I think of Doctor Strangelove, where, he's talking about like when the bombs come and he already has it all planned out, like how long people will have to live underneath it. And I don't know, in the back of my head, I always think about that. And like he's talking about it from survival, but like this is a great movie, I think, because it's okay. The people are there,
Mhm.
and it's like I think you have with the people, you have the military guys, kind of like I think representing the military.
Yeah.
If they don't necessarily have like a big structure. I think society, like structure, is a big thing in the movie, but you have them, you have scientists, and then you have just civilians. So
Right.
I think you have like three sects of civilization
Mhm.
that are usually maybe butting heads over ideas. And I think like in this movie it's kind of like a lot more of a like micro view of that.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
I think that's really interesting because a lot of zombie movies just focus on the survival thing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this weird divide where like the military guys are just like, look, we're not necessarily looking for a cure, we're looking for a way to annihilate these things, whereas the doctors and the civilians to an extent are trying to figure out like, no, how can we possibly reverse this? How can we cure this? And I think the most interesting question to me that the film poses is, I think everybody knows like the old saying that knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
But what about when you hold that knowledge hostage? Because I think that's a very big element that's at play in this film, because they have that meeting towards the beginning that Captain Rhodes calls,
Yeah.
and like he literally like holds people at gunpoint. You know, tells them they only have a couple weeks, and I think it's so interesting because it's like they're not going to get anywhere without the doctor's assistance.
Yeah.
And because the doctor isn't working in a way they like, they're like they're abusing their power, quite literally. So I don't know what you think.
You think
about
the
that.
doctors are abusing their power, or you think the military is abusing their power?
Well, I think the military is abusing their power. I think the development of the doctor characters is a really fascinating thing to get into as well.
I think another thing that I like is that, I mean, we're not going to get into spoilers right now, but I mean, it's the third of the Dead movie. You could, you know, things have gone poorly at this point. You know, they start off the movie letting you know everything's gone.
Right.
Like, you know, if there is something, they're not finding it.
Yeah.
But they're not even expecting to find it. Like, it's not like society is starting to crumble and then people are reacting to it, or it's not like things are starting and there's not like, I think a lot of zombie movies kind of get annoying because there's a lot of the tension gets built up from is there a way out of it? Like, can we stop this? Is there a cure? Like, they're looking for a cure in the movie, but I mean, you can just tell watching it. It's, you know, they get. I think one of the doctors says that he thinks that it's 400,000 to 1, like zombies compared. Like, so you start off this movie kind of knowing like, okay, everything's done.
Yeah. You
Like,
kind of start off this movie thinking about like the bottom of a mountain. The avalanche has happened.
Yeah.
You know, the damage is done. You know what I mean?
And not a lot of zombie movies do that. It's always just, you know,
The snowball.
is it only happening here? And then like the twist is it's you know, it's not like a I Am Legend or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't matter. It's not really what this movie is about, and I think that it doesn't even ever attempt to be, and I think that's why it's another like interesting take.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of zombie movies are like Batman movies in a regard that like, or Spider-Man movies, like how many times do we have to see the uncle and the parents die? Like, we know how this goes.
Right.
Like, just show us from that point on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what this film does a really good job of. It's just kind of like, look, you get it, let's go.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing that I like is that it's not like you know, The Walking Dead or something where they have this nice society going on,
Right.
and then it's like you see how great things are, and in the back of your head you're always like, okay, things are so great, it's obviously gonna go to shit. But this movie, they're in a cave, which it's a little confusing because the top scenes obviously are in Florida. They say that they're in Florida.
They show an alligator.
They show an alligator, and then they're in a cave. I mean, like, maybe limestone caves, I don't know, but we're both from Florida. We can tell you there's not that many caves around, and not of the scale that they have, which I was never 100% sure. I think they kind of got into it that it was like a military installation, but it seemed like more for bookkeeping. Like, I guess a cave is a nice place to put papers. Like, it just didn't, and they were like talking about like it was not Fort Knox. Like it seemed like they said that like their kind of situation got put together in a couple of days. I'm guessing like when this was all going down.
Right.
So they were like, well, this place has like a bunch of, you know, paper scientific documents. Like, this isn't a military like bunker or anything.
Right.
This is just like where we're storing papers, and it just so happens that it's a good place.
Yeah, and
I guess.
And you can tell it's not even like a fully developed bunker because I thought it was a really fascinating shot. Sarah, the main character, she's walking down the hallway after her and Miguel have a fight. You know what I mean? She kicks him out of the room. She's walking down the hallway. I think it's so interesting that you have a regular hallway for half of it, and then it's just like the inside of this cave is the other part of the wall. It's like they didn't even finish building out the bunker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like half cave, half office building.
Yeah.
Ultimately is what it looks like. Like, they have the, you know, the squares tiles and everything, like, and I mean, obviously cinder block, but it's like, you're right, there's like half of it's sterile, then half of it's a cave. You know, and then they have like the loading thing or anything, but yeah. I guess we'll keep the beginning to technical, and then we'll get to spoilers later.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I really like about this movie is that, ironically, it's one of the highest budget movies that Romero has ever done. I
Really?
think like he did a movie in 2005 that was like a bigger budget.
Yeah.
That was technically in the Of the Dead series, but I don't think he likes it all that much. But anyway, and by big budget, we're talking $3 million in 1985.
That's a lot.
I think what I also love about this movie is how much story and how much characters you can tell in just one setting, and not even a louder setting. It's a cave.
Yeah.
Like it's just a cave and some office like buildings. That's what I also really like about this movie. And obviously, like Romero, he's always done low budget, but I really think what this movie like does with just the limited kind of like resources, and it's just a very simple movie.
Yeah.
There's no need to overcomplicate it. There's no need to have really multiple sets or anything. You just have the beginning to catch your interest, which was just a couple streets, I guess they closed off.
Yeah.
And then pretty much, I would say 80% of the movie is in this cave.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I never really get bored of being down in that cave. I'm never wondering, like, can we go somewhere else? And because I think personally, like, where this movie, the meat and the potatoes of it is in, like, the characters and their interactions.
Oh, absolutely. I think the character I gravitated the most towards off the bat was probably Miguel.
Miguel, why do you think Miguel?
Because he's so, like, stressed out and panic, and Sarah's trying to talk him down, like, you can't even function because you're so stressed out, and he's just, like, in complete denial about it, even though he was just completely morally broken. Like, he was just shattered, and so I thought that was a really interesting character, and also physically you can tell he's let himself go.
Yeah, he's like 90 pounds soaking wet.
He's like 90 pounds, he's soaking wet in sweat, his beard like is grown all the way down his neck, like you just tell he can't function anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think you see enough of that.
I think like with Miguel and him being so stressed out, and Sarah's stressed out too, but you could tell she's keeping it together. And I think like we were talking about military, scientists, civilian. I think Miguel is the most realistic civilian if you think about it, because I mean, I don't know. I think if someone was put in that situation, it's hard to tell. You got 12 people living in a cave, and you might be the last humans left on Earth. Like, you either, I guess, accept that and try and figure out some work for yourself to do to keep yourself preoccupied, or you just absolutely snap. So, I think I think Miguel is just kind of gives you that. Okay, if it was just a random guy kind of thrown in there, and he is military, but he's more or less just a random guy. He's not very good at his job.
No, not at all.
Like what? So you like how he's just stressed, and like you think maybe he's like reacting to it normally?
Yeah, well, I think
how someone would.
Yeah, I think in a way like Miguel is what most people would be in that situation, and I think it's interesting to bring up that he's in the military and he's not very good at his jobs, and so it's like the only person that really cares for him is Sarah. You know what I mean? He's not even respected by the military members. They're very racist towards him the entire movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like somebody else can screw up the same job, or it could be something that's not even his fault, and he'll get blamed at it because, you know, they say that yellow this, that yellow that, referring to Miguel. And so, like, you can just tell that they clearly just don't care about him. So he feels alone, he feels worthless, and Sarah's really the only person sticking their neck out for him.
Yeah, and I think, like, what you talked about with the racism, I would say, like, it's there's a lot of reasons why things aren't working out between everyone, and I think that it's like personified, like someone just calls him like the yellow-faced bastard or whatever like that, and then it's like, okay, so we have some people who are racist against the others,
right?
And
hey there, partner.
Got a spooky black cat for Halloween. Go down there, chill out. Anyway, so yeah, like we have, again, it's like we're not trying to do this whole like symbolic thing. It's like, no, the guy just is obviously racist, so it's just one of them, maybe two.
Yeah, I would say.
But when
like,
you're talking about 12 people, that's like, okay, that's enough representation of the racism.
Yeah, it's a very magnified kind of Yeah, it's a very magnified scope of like I think different dynamics and just culture in general. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's pretty much just Steele and then like his buddy Rickles that are like the racist ones, but it's mostly Steele. You're right.
Yeah, but that's enough when you only have a cast of about 12 people,
right? Yeah,
more or less. I mean, we 12 people, and even a couple of them are extras. I would say there's probably 5 main characters that you're concerned with in this movie. But you know, you have him, racist. They're the military guys like kind of go, I think, the extra mile just to let it be known that like Sarah is really, I think, she's the only woman down there.
Yeah.
And they're, of course, not giving her proper respect, being sex. So we have racism and then we have sexism.
Yeah.
And then, I think we kind of just have, the doctor, whose name always escapes me because they keep calling him Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think they do that too much. And I think it kind of messed with the character a little bit because I couldn't shake that out of my head the entire time.
Right, but you have like maybe a science kind of goes too far thing. Like I think there's a lot of things, and then it's like if they go unchecked or if they take long enough. But it's like those are things that I think zombies are not. If you've just locked 12 random people down in like the same like bunker, whatever going on outside, like. After a while, I think people would kind of start tearing, like we get like a lot of Stanford Prison Experiment, like people start like tearing each other apart, and I think I think that's what really the movie is about. It's to me, it's a very depressing movie.
Oh, it's super bleak. And,
it's not. I mean, like it has horror in it. If you going into this movie wanting some gore, there is gore. Yeah. It's not. The whole movie, I would not call this a slasher flick by any means.
It rewards you though.
Yeah, it does reward you, and it has some of the better gore effects I think that I personally have seen in a lot of zombies.
Even from the get go, the one with the tongue hanging out of it, that was disgusting.
But I think that's why I like this as a zombie movie so much, is that it is a zombie movie, but it really just works on its own of just being a movie.
Yeah.
Like I think I was telling you that. It felt almost like a play to me. Like so much of the movie was just character interaction and talking, and like zombies come in. I mean, they're interspersed without, but like the zombie, the real problem started like the last kind of quarter of the movie. But more or less, it's really I almost saw it as a stage play. And like I'm thinking about it because it's just one setting, and they're kind of like changing the setting, but it's still the same cavern kind of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I could totally see like when you write this script, you chunk it up into 3 acts. Act 1 is just kind of like we need to find a solution, and they're all at odds about what that solution is. And then I feel like Act 2 is kind of like, well, what research is this doctor really breaking through with, and is he doing it through like decent means?
Yeah, we've set up what everyone's doing, but now we're going to see like what it is they're doing
and how it functions. Yeah, and then Act 3 is obviously when it all falls apart.
And I think the zombie bub. What I really like with him and the doctor's character's name escapes me, but we'll just call him Frankenstein for this because they call him Frankenstein, and it's pretty obvious why. But Bud pretty much acts, aside from the 3 hero characters, he's a zombie and he has more humanity than most of the people down here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
He's
like
very childlike.
He's innocent. Yeah. Like he, obviously he didn't ask to be turned into a zombie, and. He is childlike because, like, the Frankenstein character, he's got a couple of screws loose. Like, when you hear him on the tape and how he's, like, actually talking to the zombies behind closed doors, it's kind of weird. But, yeah, he's being treated like a child. And in a way, like, he's always talking about starting fresh. And even though Bub's a zombie, he doesn't hate. Like, he's just kind of acting on instinct.
He's just
totally he's just playing with the toys or something, and, like, he ends up showing some aggression, but it's towards somebody. It's like
that showed it to him first.
That showed it to him first. It's like, and he's rational. Like again, a lot. Like it's weird, and I like that.
Yeah.
Like the zombie is almost one of the most human characters in this movie.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the doctor talks about this whole thing in the beginning when he's explaining to Sarah like how the zombies function, which I guess we're getting into a little bit of spoilers here. He's talking about how their brain is the only thing they need to function.
Yeah.
But really deep down, they're just acting on primitive instinct.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not born hating things, you know what I mean? And that's how the zombie is in a way, and he develops that hatred because somebody shows him aggression.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was another very interesting thing of just that they're acting on instinct.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And I think that's another way you could maybe look at this movie is that they're acting on instinct, and then Frankenstein's character gives a nice speech about society puts rules in place and then their rewards. His version of doing that with the zombie is just simply a couple of treats. Give him some toys to play with, and like that is his rewards. And I think like with the humans, that society, there's not a lot of reward. They realize that kind of like being down here, there's not much point in it.
Yeah.
And things kind of crumble. So I wonder like if maybe the movie is talking about it, if there's people that don't see society, not so much that they have a place in society, but that society isn't rewarding them, or they don't think they're being treated fairly, like they're getting the wrong end of the stick. Like that's why like sometimes you'll see somebody act crazy because they're not like, you know what I mean? It's like they're not getting what they want, or society doesn't feel structured very well for them. And when people try and put structure in place, it's usually for them. Like when the military starts, you know, the guys start getting kind of a little into themselves, they start telling the scientists what to do, and now the scientists aren't getting rewarded. But then it's, you know, I don't know. It kind of falls apart once you realize what the scientists are doing. But
No, I think there's like two ways you can go with it, because Sarah has this really amazing scene with I believe John's the pilot, right? Mm-hmm. She has this really amazing scene with him, and he's kind of talking about this idea of what really happens after we die.
Yeah.
Does this all really matter? Because he's like, they're storing all these documents and records and files down here about, you know, volcanoes and things like that. But what's it really going to matter when we're all dead?
Yeah.
And so he's just like, I'm done working for other people. I'm going to do my own thing, in a way, live my best life. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a different way that character goes about it.
Yeah, and I don't think he's like talking about it from an anarchy perspective.
No, not at all.
I think like at the point, I don't think he's always been this way. I think he just realizes he's maybe a bit more realistic with how things are right now. Yeah. So he's like, at this point, we can try and rebuild, but what difference does it make? Like, it's, you know, and it's not like I don't think the movie's speaking from the perspective of normal society, but I think like when society might be at its worst, it's ironically maybe when you have to start looking at like, do we change things? Do we try and better things? Or like, do we just need to refresh, or does this all matter?
Yeah, and how much can you really change? Like, can you truly start over from the ground up? Which is an idea that's presented with, you know, obviously just birthing children and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Like Sarah's kind of, her role is she's trying to find a cure, and that's like mentioned once in the movie. Yeah. And I think they're like, well, we barely have rubbing alcohol. Like, we don't have an expansive, like, Dow Chemical is not down the street. We're not going to be making some type of vaccine to, you know, crop dust. And again, it goes in the movie's idea of like, hey, you know, these movie tropes of trying to find a cure or doing, like, it's done. We're done. Like, just focus on these people. They're not, you know what I mean? Like, they're not going to be saving anything. Everyone's really trying to save themselves, and that's really what drives most of these characters' actions.
Yeah, I think Sarah is such an interesting character for that reason, though, because she is so, like, resilient, things like that. And I don't know if it's the actress or what, but it got a very, like, Carrie Fisher, like, Princess Leia vibe, you know, like a holding out hope sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it seems like she's the only one trying to have some foresight for a future.
Almost a
collective future.
Yeah, like a Sarah Connor or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's a strong female role, and it's not bad because it really doesn't have a lot of the bad tropes that sometimes those, you know, strong females kind of
Right.
play into, you particularly around the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like she, just from an acting perspective, I think a lot of the acting, they really saved themselves from going 80s cheesy.
No, they no,
Even the military, like
Rhodes.
yeah, Rhodes when he's yelling in the movie, you get the feeling of like dad just hit mom at the dinner table. You're not like, he's pounding the table, but you can tell he's angry. It's not, you know, it's not a stereotypical like drill sergeant yelling at people. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just surprising, like it's decent acting across the board too.
Yeah, pretty much all the characters, I would say, with the exception of maybe Rickles.
Yeah, like a little bit of a folly, like
Yeah. But like all of them were really fleshed out and had their arcs. Even Bubs, the zombie.
The zombie, yeah.
The zombie has a character arc.
I think
It's
you
really
can almost argue
fascinating.
that he's one of the main characters too. I would say.
I think
he's-
on the credits he was like number 6. Like he
Yeah.
was listed pretty early on there.
he got his sack. No, he didn't get a sack card. He didn't really have any lines technically, unless you count moaning. But
He tried to say a sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just to get in there. But yeah, so I don't know. Do you have any more from it? I'm interested from your perspective of like maybe more focused on, you know, with the play, the acting, the staging, and what did you think of that? Because I'm looking
Yeah.
at it from a technical perspective of a movie. But
Right.
again, like this is a movie, but I don't really think that I can start criticizing its production value and its stylistic choices because I don't really think they were really going for that.
No.
Like-
And I mean, like you said, it's a $3 million movie,
Yeah.
which is a lot of money to you and I. In a movie perspective, not a lot of money
No.
at all. And it's so interesting because I have seen Night of the Living Dead both as a movie and as a play multiple times. And I think it plays just as strong both ways because I think the thing that George Romero does really, really well is that he's not focusing on the impact of civilization as a whole. He's focusing on the impact of individuals. I think with both those movies respectively.
Yeah.
And I think with this film even more so because it's not the first one. It doesn't have to prove it necessarily. And I think there's just like, it's like, how do you take something old being a zombie movie and make it new?
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, well, let's really dig under the surface of like these characters and what it would do to them over time. You know, I think it's so interesting that the scientists are in a way doing this like psychological study of the zombies and how much they retain and what they can do. When really, I feel like this movie, kind of like referencing what you said earlier, like the Stanford Prison Experiment, it's like a case study.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a lot more focused on the people, and that's why I think of it as more play-like. Is that
and
it
that
has set
analogy works.
pieces and stuff,
Yeah.
but it's like a lot of the movie is just character interaction.
And I think that's why the acting works so well.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the focus.
Yeah, and they're
Like, you're
not
not-
being put into ridiculous situations to where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that's not how, you know, somebody would scream in that situation. Like it's
Yeah, not at all.
yeah.
Like Aristotle has these elements he talks about in theater, just kind of like priorities, you know, and you could argue now that like spectacle, which was like the bottom of his list, is now a priority with a lot of films these days.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this film really focused on like characters, plot, and then spectacle really was like sort of towards the bottom of the list. That's not to say it was bad. It just wasn't. It was secondary to what was going on between these people.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like this, I don't think that this is the type of movie that would get like a movie theater release. Like even if this came out today and everything being normal, like this would be a Netflix movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Do you know what kind of reviews it got by chance?
you know, I think off the top of my head, I would say like an average 3 out of 5. You know, if
Okay.
you know, and I think a lot of people complained of how limited of a movie that it was.
Yeah.
But I think enough people gave it a pass because they knew that Romero isn't the kind of guy that that comes in behind him with a multi-million-dollar, a huge
Right.
budget. And I think a lot of the negativity maybe towards the movie was really just the sets, which I think that work,
Yeah.
but maybe somebody who wasn't expecting that didn't want to watch a whole movie taking place in a cave. I think it's another thing that maybe this might miss the mark with a lot of audiences, because I think if you describe overall what happens in the movie, it does sound kind of boring.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the case with a couple of things. But yeah, and that's the weird thing, and that's why I wanted to watch it,
Yeah.
and I really wanted you to watch it, because you don't really hear about this movie all that often.
No.
But when you look, it has reviews pretty much on par. Like, it's not, Night of the Living Dead 90% Rotten Tomatoes, and then this movie 12. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm like, it has good enough reviews to where I want to watch it. And I watched it, I was like, this movie is great. Like, I loved watching it, and I loved watching it also because of how relentlessly depressing it is.
Yeah, no.
There's not a lot of happy-go-lucky moments in this movie, and I was just surprised watching a movie.
And I think there were attempts at humor to lighten it up.
Yeah,
I got like some Steven Spielberg vibes a little bit.
Yeah.
Who I think is like the master at like just
just
twisting
enough for what you had
Yeah.
to do to not make you want to cry this entire movie.
Mhm.
It's like, I think, again, like going back to maybe the whole 80s thing of the Cold War, I think you have a lot of 80s movies that are cheesy, or you could call them
Yeah.
campy,
Yeah.
because they were just trying to be happy. So I think a lot of people were, feeling low because of everything that was going on back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that this movie shines because of how well it hits the nail on the head of maybe the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cathartic in a way because it's so depressing. Like,
Yeah.
kind of, at least it's not that bad. You know what I mean?
Mm.
You kind of get that feeling of it.
So it's a good 2020 watch. I'll say that.
Yeah, it incidentally fits in very well.
Yeah, I think
what's
there's
going on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff in this movie that really is kind of relevant today.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing is, I think you could remake this movie today. It would still be well received. I still don't think 90% of people would give it a chance, though, because it doesn't really have a whole lot of spectacle, flashy stuff going for it.
Yeah, and I'm torn because I wonder if, given a bigger budget, you wanted to give some like dynamicism, like a dynamic idea to it, like maybe interspersed without the scenes. Maybe they go up to the surface a couple more times, and they go adventuring or whatever, and try and like that. You can maybe give some more entertainment with that, but again, it's just I don't. Maybe if you wanted to remake it, but I think in this case, I don't think the movie really needed that. And
No.
watching it a second time, I was kind of going into a movie of, now that I know what happens, how much does it keep my attention? And it still kept my attention. I was still kind of almost hanging off every word of what everybody was saying, and I wasn't really wishing that they were going to go do something else.
No, I don't think a lot really kind of misses you, so to speak. And I think it's a good time capsule of a movie. Like, it is still very 80s in a way.
Oh, 100%.
But
The music
the
music almost
awesome.
puts it over the edge a couple of times. Where you're like, yes, it's 80s.
Yeah, there's a couple times where that kind of like boom, 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 like jumps in. And you're like,
some guitar solos interspersed.
and that's kind of when something's about to happen. But that's as bad as it gets. Like truly, that's as bad as it gets. It's just those little things right there.
There's not even a huge amount of music in this movie either.
No. It's a pretty simple but consistent score.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we've gone, I think, through all the technical jargon, I think maybe we should start giving some context of what this movie is about. So spoilers from here on out. So, like we said, the movie, really not a lot of intro, just starts with these group of 3 people on a helicopter landing in this abandoned town, and there's nothing there. They're just trying to find people. They're saying they're 100 miles out from where they usually are. They start trying to find some people. No one's there. So they get back in the helicopter. So they go back to the base that we were speaking about, and it's underground again in a Florida cavern, whatever, low budget movie, and they have remnants of a military, which I got the feeling that when they were putting this whole thing together that the military was there to protect the scientists,
Yeah.
and they were trying to do that. So there's military, there's scientists, and I think Sarah is a scientist. She was always a scientist, but she really crosses over in a lot of the camps, like from civilian to military. She kind of like going, but anyway, so they're down there obviously trying to find a cure, and the head of the scientists really seemed to be this Dr. Frankenstein guy. He is really
Quirky.
yeah, quirky. He's really tearing into these zombies. And another part I love about the movie is that they have the corral. Like, you know what I mean? Like they have to, if they want to, they're going out, they'll bring some zombies back.
They got a
bring 'em
herd
back
of
in
them.
They have a herd, and then like they put them in like a little thing and try and bring them out.
Although something you do find early on is that the doctor is also kind of serving his own interest in a way, because you find out that a soldier, Cooper, dies early on, and they don't really know why. And then you find the doctor using his body and kind of implying that they may have killed him. That's what I got.
It's possible, 100%. They never really say why he died.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that they don't come back
It's
to.
possible the doctor could have poisoned him. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him because he is doing some gruesome experiments. Yeah. And this is like where some of the gore starts taking place. So if you're a fan of gore, you get a little taste in the beginning. He's sticking probes, he's mutilating these zombies, and I really like it because you'll usually try and root for the scientists to try and find a cure, but you see what this guy is doing, and you're like, he might be quirky, but he's doing so much to these zombies where you're like, this is not a good guy.
Yeah, you ask yourself the question, but at what cost?
At what cost? And then, again, like, you try and say the story of this movie, and there really isn't a whole lot. Obviously, the military, the Rhodes, he starts wanting to take over the operation.
Oh, yeah, totally just kind of manhandling.
Yeah, the scientists aren't really down with that because they're kind of like, this is what we're doing. Not really, like, kind of last hope, and he's just like, I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
But you realize he doesn't really have that much of a place to go. Like he's not thought. Rhodes has not thought through this the whole thing. You get introduced to the pilot and his friend.
Yeah.
They're really, other than Sarah, about the three decent people down there. Oh man, what was Sarah's boyfriend's name again? Miguel. Miguel is having trouble throughout all of this. He screws up once in the corral because he lets the stick that they're holding the zombies.
Yeah, it's like a stick with a harness at the end of it that they get around the neck.
And more or less, I will say that once they establish all of the characters, and then I think shit really starts to hit the fan when Miguel, through really no fault of his own, because the collar snaps, he doesn't let go.
Yeah.
One of the zombies bites the other guy, and then now that the military was already at their kind of boiling point, with the scientists not really giving them answers, and them just wanting to get out of here anyway, they're like, all right, just kind of screw it. Like at the first sight of lost control, they're like, all right, let's go. So Rhodes, as punishment, like he almost goes to shoot Miguel, and then Miguel gets bitten. Sarah lovingly cuts off his arm to try and stop infection, and then brings him back to the pilot and his friend, the little camp out. Miguel, for some reason, and I'm not 100% sure why he decides to do this. Maybe he just feels like he's lost all hope. But while they're not looking and he's bandaged up, Miguel goes to sneak off and goes up. The one entrance that they have is this elevator. He decides to go up opens up the gates, lets the zombies, leads them into the elevator, and he lets the zombies eat them, but not before he lowers the elevator to let all the zombies into the caverns.
I think he also does that as a distraction for everybody else.
Oh, maybe.
Because the helicopter's up there, and I'm like, how are they going to get to the helicopter if the zombies are up there and they're going out and around?
True. Okay. So maybe
He sacrificed himself, I think, for Sarah.
Maybe. Yeah. It was just weird because, like, so I couldn't tell if he knew that Sarah and the other two knew how to escape, and that's why I was like, is he just saying?
So
like,
Miguel
fuck
was
it?
with John.
Yeah.
And John was the one that went after them after he knew that they took them to the herd and let him out.
Okay.
So I feel like there was and this is kind of feeding into the play thing where like sometimes they don't tell you everything, it's just like implied information, and I felt like that was maybe an implied conversation.
Well, yeah. I mean, the only reason I care was Miguel just saying "fuck you, Sarah"? Like, does he just fine with everybody down there dying, or did he just think that they got away? I don't know. Maybe I'll have to rewatch it a third time. But anyway, so that's about 3/4 of the way through the zombies, and now if you're watching this for a zombie movie, you finally get your zombie outbreak.
Oh yeah,
And when the zombie outbreak happens,
it's full out.
yeah, it's full out. Like you start getting all the best gore effects too. Every horrible military guy gets what's coming from him. They each get their own scene of being torn apart, which is I loved it.
No, yeah, it was awesome.
Oh yeah, Dr. Frankenstein turns out that he was keeping any of the civilians that died or any of the military guys, keeping them in a freezer and using them as treats to coax Bub into behaving correctly. Like,
just like you would train a dog.
yeah,
or something like that.
but he needed fresh meat, and he wasn't telling anybody that he was giving them fresh meat or where he was getting it. So Rhodes finds out that Dr. Frankenstein here is feeding the zombies as men and is not happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets a full assault rifle.
Oh yeah,
like
just
in the
executes
chest.
them.
Yeah,
once.
executes. So Dr. Frankenstein, you're not really rooting for him, so you're like, all right, cool, he's dead. That's probably for the best. Rhodes dies. Everybody really just dies. And I think, what did you think about the ending?
So the ending kind of confused me because Sarah has these nightmares throughout the film, and you think at the very last moment when they're getting to the chopper that she's gonna get eaten by a zombie because one grabs her, and then she wakes up, and I was like, "Oh, please don't tell me this whole movie was a dream."
All a dream.
That's what I was worried about. There's some weird metaphor that I'm not getting, and maybe you get it. In the very beginning of the movie, we see a calendar. It's got every day of October marked off. And we see that twice in the movie. And then at the end of the movie, she's on a beach with John and then his right-hand man, the alcoholic character. They're on a beach. They're just kind of living their best life. The helicopter's there, so it implies that they escaped. And she marks off her calendar November 4th. And I know there's something there that I'm not getting. I just couldn't quite figure it out. Do you have anything on that?
I think, like, I don't know if you wanted to read into it. Maybe it was all this horrible, terrifying stuff in her life was happening in October, spooky season. And then she is now on a nice, calm beach, and time has passed, and the spooky times are over.
Yeah.
Or it was just to maybe let you know that the ending really did happen, that they really did make it to the beach, and that they've been there for a couple of days.
Well, because the ending works for me because right before she gets attacked at the chopper, like when they're going towards the helicopter, you see the herd of zombies. They've come back up the elevator, and I was asking myself, I'm like, well, that's not possible.
I don't know if it was that or if it was more zombies, like coming in because of the commotion.
It was hard for me to tell. Well, they would have had to come from inside because it was inside the gate the helicopter was. But they also reused a lot of the same extras, which was really like throwing me. Yeah. So like I wasn't sure if it was actually the same zombies or different zombies like you're saying, because some of them were the same. It was like there was a football jock looking one and a clown
Yeah.
looking one, and I saw them in the crowd, and I was like, okay, so those are the same zombies that came down. How'd they get back up?
It's very possible, because I mean, if you're just sitting there and you're like, I need these zombies to look like a different herd of zombies, you're probably not going to want these specific looking zombies like a clown in the shot. So yeah, maybe they're in there for a reason. Maybe, yeah, the ending is a dream or whatever.
Yeah.
I love the ending because, again, circling back to how relentlessly depressing this movie is, the ending is happy, but you're hoping for them to clarify whether Sarah is dreaming, if the ending of them making it to the beach is real, or if it isn't.
Yeah.
And the movie never bothers to tell you. It's like, yeah, maybe it ended well.
It's ambiguous.
We're not going to tell you, though. So the only thing you know that happened is really horrible, depressing stuff. So here's your little, happy-go-lucky ending that may or may not have actually been real.
It's so weird because I think at the ending, it's just like light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if you went through the tunnel or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't really know if you reached the other side quite yet. You just know that you're seeing the light.
Yeah, like whether, and that's the thing, is like, I think if we're going to talk about imagery, there's a lot of like religious, like particularly like Christian or Catholic imagery, so you can maybe think, if she died, that's her heaven. Maybe she got to heaven, or if she maybe literally have gotten there.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, if you want to maybe look at it a happy light, whether Sarah and her friends are still alive or not, they at least made it to a good place and a better place than where they were at.
Yeah.
But you don't get the typical zombie movie ending of them surviving or not.
Right.
Because it's, again, this movie really, it's about survival, but you know none of them are really going to make it. There's really no way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and a lot of zombie movies fall into that trap, and I think it's a bit of a trope where it's like it has to end one of two ways. It's got to be horribly tragic or the perfect ending.
All the tension is whether they're going to survive or not. I mean, The Walking Dead has done 11 seasons of whether they're going to survive or not.
Right.
They keep getting to the nice place that they're going to survive, and then bad things happen, and then they have to keep on going to survive.
And this film doesn't reward you quite in that way.
No. There's no reward in this movie. There's barely any comedy. Almost everybody is an asshole.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think George A. Romero was maybe writing the script. He was just pissed at something, but you could tell like this movie has a lot of malice towards, I think, humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what I think I like also about it, is like with the zombie movie tropes, there's always like the good examples of humans, or like, but there's a group of them, and they're focused on, and it's like, oh look, everyone's like, things are bad, but there are some people who are gonna push to make it, and we're gonna focus on them, and it's great, and we're gonna root for them. This movie doesn't really have that. No, it's focusing on the main characters. They may or may not have survived, but the movie more or less focuses on all the fucked up things that everybody's doing down in this little cavern. There's really not a lot of society. So I don't know. I think that's why this movie stands out for me. From a horror movie perspective, I think that it's really introspective for a horror movie. Horror movies typically have their themes, but it's typically not made of the themes.
Yeah, I think horror movies are notoriously shallow, and this is such a deep movie from a lot of different perspectives, for sure.
And again, I wasn't expecting it. I'm going in thinking this is the third Dawn of the Dead movie. On the surface, you're like, this is something I feel like you would find in the Blockbuster $1 bin. Like,
for sure.
Like, you think Day of the Dead, and you're like, okay, somebody took, like, this has to be a remake, or this has to be an offshoot. Like, no, this is a George A. Romero of the Dead movie.
Yeah.
So, but it's just not talked about all that much. I
really knew Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. I never really thought about this. You know what I mean?
So, closing thoughts?
Yeah.
Are we done here? Is there more to dissect, or should we just? Do we need to tell? If you're watching this and you made it this far, I hope maybe you kind of stopped at the spoilers, but even if you did, the things that we talked about, still, please go watch this movie.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
$3 to rent on Amazon. You're not losing much.
It may even be for free, if you have
Who
some
knows?
sort of on-demand service.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely give your thoughts if you have them. Just drop a comment. But yeah, I feel like my big takeaway from this movie is how even when the future of humanity is at stake, people still can't put their own personal goals aside, to unite and work towards a solution, because it may not be the solution that benefits them. You know what I mean? And I just think that's a pretty universal theme, but I thought the way this film tackled it was pretty unique and fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, most of my feelings towards this movie is that, is the situation that they're in is when push comes to shove.
Yeah.
You kind of start. It's a great movie about how people would probably act.
Oh, for sure.
And it's not good. And there's very little good in the movie. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a unique watch for me. Is you just get to see just people being evil.
Keep it rolling, another teardrop, but I know just how to let them go and feed the ocean. There's plenty more that gather when you know just how to let them roll off your face. Plenty struggles we face now. Look at my face and tell me if I look straight.